I think for me, personal development was understanding that leadership was putting people in the right place to succeed and making sure that everybody has what they need and that their voice is heard. They have an opportunity to speak and influence the decisions that are being made, not just being handed a solution. That's kind of where the leadership pivot started to happen. It's like, okay, I can start to turn the lens around on myself and see what would I want from this and start listening more intently to employees.
Matt, a friend of mine posted on Facebook the other day, absolutely terrifying video. There's this company called Dinner in the Sky, and maybe you've heard of it. And they suspend a dinner table and chairs, a huge table, like probably like 15, 20 chairs around it. And you eat dinner in the sky at different locations around the world.
What?
Yeah. Would you do that?
No, that sounds
like
terrifying.
50 meters suspended from a crane at a dinner table. And it's like bougie, man. They're like eating like sashimi and fine wines and champagne. It's absolutely like heights terrify me. In fact, yeah. I've always read, and I need you to confirm or tell me that I've been wrong for a really long time, that there's two fears that we're all born with, and every other fear is learned: the fear of falling and the fear of loud noises.
Hmm.
I'm asking you, like,
right. Yeah. That sounds right to me.
Because you're the doctor, so you should know that. So
I remember as a baby, I remember being scared of loud noises.
What about falling?
Definitely. That's why babies always throw their hands up in the air.
I'm trying to find justification for being terrified to eat dinner at this hanging restaurant table thing. To say that this is okay. We're not here to talk about fears today. In fact, we're here. We have a guest, but before I introduce him, I want to play a quick word association game with you.
Okay.
Are you ready? So I'm going to say a word, and I want you to say the first word that comes to mind. Okay?
Okay.
Crawfish.
Boil.
Okay, that's good. All right. New Orleans.
Saints.
All right. Shark Tank.
Business pitch.
Business pitch. Awesome. I'm so glad you said that, because that's actually what I was hoping you would say. That's the direction we're going to go in, because we're going to talk about business, specifically entrepreneurialism today. And we have a guest to have that conversation with us today. His name is Michael Barr. Michael's been a long-time friend of mine. He is one of the owners at OPA Signs and Graphics. He's an entrepreneur. He has started several businesses. So we're going to have a fun conversation with him about some of the challenges and obstacles he's faced in business, and then some of the ways he has solved some of those obstacles. So, Michael, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. This is great.
Yeah, man. Tell us a little bit about.
Welcome. Thank you. Thanks for being here.
What do we need to know about you before we have this conversation?
Let's see. So I grew up in a sign shop, not literally, but my dad and uncle started it about 40 years ago. And since I was a kid, I can remember just coming here. We're located in downtown New Orleans, right on the edge of downtown. So our company's OPA Signs and Graphics. And I can remember just looking across at the Superdome. You know, the city was real big when I was a kid. So I learned business at a young age, just kind of watching it happen around me, you know, from the graphic design elements to the fabrication to the screen printing. There's just a lot of stuff going on. So I think over the last few years, we've really just been dialed in as far as, you know, trying to figure out what makes the team, you know, cohesive, and how do we put our strategies together to make us all kind of come together and work as a team. So.
Yeah. So you're kind of in a family business. So the question is, like, where's the entrepreneurialism in that, right? This is more of an existing business.
Right.
But over the past few years, I think you've recognized maybe some challenges and how to fix those challenges, or some obstacles that you face in the business. And since then, maybe had some other little opportunities that came about.
Yep. So I think that the entrepreneurism comes in with trying to find, with the legacy business, it's pretty well established. You know, we've got a pretty stable client base. And I think it's just more or less trying to find what's more efficient. How do we get from A to B a little quicker? How do we do it with a little more harmony? How do we, you know, just do things more effectively instead of trying to do it the old way, you know? So.
Yeah. So being in a family business, I kind of grew up in a family business as well. On the insurance side, my dad was, you went to a sign shop. I went to an office where
Mhm.
my dad sold insurance a little bit. I didn't get to see the Superdome every day,
Mhm.
unfortunately. But I'm curious in the transition of you taking more of the reins and you having more, I guess, decision-making ability.
Mhm. Yeah.
Explain that to me a little bit. Like, how was that a difficult process for you to be able to have that authority, or was it an easy transition for previous ownership, or not previous
Yeah.
ownership, the current ownership, but your dad and uncle?
So I think the timing was just on a really long timeline to get to where we're at today. So it kind of all started when a friend had recommended the Goldman Sachs program,
Mhm.
10,000 Small Businesses, which is really great. I highly recommend it for anybody who's either in a startup or in a business that they're trying to get to that next level. And so that kind of sparked this. I have these certain leadership abilities that, putting teams together and figure out who's the right person in the right spot and how to just get the harmony going. So that's really kind of where it sparked. And then through that process came some, the book Traction, which was really impactful. And I think what it did was it took all the things that I learned from that program and put them into more realistic terms. Like, okay, what now? What do I do with this
Yeah.
information? How do I make it go?
Yeah,
Um,
we're actually gonna talk a lot about Traction a little bit later,
mm,
but I'm curious about your experience at Goldman Sachs and in our silly little word association game in the beginning, one of the words was Shark Tank, and Matt said business pitch.
yeah.
So um, Matt Matt and I and another friend for years and years and years, at the end of every year, we would get together and we would uh, kind of present our business plans to each other,
Yeah.
and we kind of ask questions and poke holes in it and kind of seek advice. It was more of like an advisory board.
Mhm.
And Matt, who likes to name things, decided that it could be that our business plans should be called Shark Tank. So that's a little
It
little
was
back.
always at the end of the year, and it was usually like 8 a.m. in the morning, and so you're coming to this office building, but you're walking into the Shark Tank.
Yeah,
It was quite thrilling for like a Thursday morning.
Yeah.
it was. It was with muffins and espresso.
Yeah.
Um, but I would send out in advance like a business plan, like a business planning sheet that would talk about strengths and weaknesses and
Mhm.
marketing plan and staffing and those types of things. And inevitably, what happened it would be us sitting there saying, "Hey, I'm trying to make this decision in business. What do you think about this?
Yeah.
I'm thinking about taking my business in this direction. What do you think about this?" So I remember our conversations when you went to Goldman Sachs, because it was almost all of a sudden like there was this different language that we got to speak with each other
Right.
about
Yeah.
business owners.
And for me, it just gave me that like moment where I could see the whole thing for what it is and understand it. And I think it was a bit more abstract before. So I think the more I'm in this space, the more I consume these types of information, the more clearer of a vision that I'm able to have and that the group's able to have. And I think that these types of programs are great because they just show you some of your blind spots. They show you some areas that you may not have clear vision on, or you didn't know that that actually might have been the reason you're not growing or getting to that next level.
I think what happens is sometimes as business owners, we confuse the roles that we play in a business, right? Like I'm a business owner. So there's an element of strategy and
Mm,
running and operating the business, but I'm also an employee, quote unquote, of the business. I'm responsible for actually executing
sure.
that strategy. And I think as business owners, we sometimes confuse those two roles,
Hmm.
and oftentimes we neglect the real business owner
Yep.
role, right? Of the strategy. And I know for me that was hugely problematic early in my business career and understanding those those two aspects. So it almost seems like the Goldman, and everyone I've spoken to who's gone through the Goldman Sachs program, they say the same thing. It's like there are aspects of the business that they never even thought about because they were focused on doing the work or executing the work.
Hmm. Yep. And I think also getting the networking that it comes with and the ability to share struggles with somebody who's actually been there too. So it's a unbiased, peer that can help you out and kind of get you unstuck. So I think for me that personal development was understanding that leadership for me was putting people in the right place to succeed, and making sure that everybody has what they need, and that their voice is heard. They have an opportunity to speak and influence the decisions that are being made, not just being handed a solution. So I think that's kind of where the leadership pivot started to happen. It's like, okay, I can start to turn the lens around on myself and see what would I want from this, and start listening more intently to our employees.
Michael, that sounds like as you're in a family business that you can get consumed, particularly early in life, you can get consumed with kind of the operation of the business, the function of the business, the day-to-day task of the business. But at some point, it sounds like you were able to step outside of that, just doing the work of the business, and see the business in a different way, from a higher perspective, a 10,000-foot view or something like that, where you're able to see not just what people are doing, but how they're functioning together as a group, what the dynamic is, what the system looks like,
Yeah.
how the processes could be made more efficient. So talk a little bit about that feeling that you may have had where you maybe as part of this program were able to recognize, whoa, I can look at this a different way.
Sure. Yeah, that's spot on. So I think the idea is, you know, as a business is either starting up that's new, or it's a legacy business, or we're in a position, whether it's sales or if it's operations, or we're doing sales and operations, and we're delivering the product, we're doing, all sorts of things, the different roles that we all play. It's understanding that at some point you've got to pull yourself out of the role that you play and start to see some sort of vision for where you're trying to go. EOS has a really great illustration, and I'm sure it's borrowed by a bunch of different business books and scholars, where it's like, there's a team that's building a road in a dense forest. And so, basically the plan is to get to the other town, but they all have machetes in their hands, and they're just kind of hacking away at the forest and the bushes, and there's no semblance of a plan. So the idea of getting outside the business is somebody's climbing up the tree and saying, let's go that way. Let's put together a moment. So, but they'll climb back down the tree and go shoulder to shoulder, and start to forge that road. But the idea is to kind of get up and cast a vision. And so working on the business and working in the business are two different things.
That's a good analogy. And Michael referenced EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System, which is in the book Traction that he mentioned, which we're going to get to here in a second. But I like that idea of being able to see big picture and then come back down and have a good sense of where to go.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, just as an aside, it's not really part of this direct conversation, but as therapists, most therapists want to be in some kind of private practice at some point. But in the training to become a therapist, we teach you how to do the work of a therapist, which is often to sit in a room with a client. But we don't teach people how to climb up the tree and see out in the future and understand where the business is headed, or how to set up the business in the beginning. So it is interesting in the sense of most of the people who are in my field want to be in business, but we have very little direct training in being in business.
No one does really. I mean, I think that's a general. I think that's across the board. I was fortunate when I was at Tulane. There were two classes that I took that were taught by a business owner. One was entrepreneurial management, which walked us through all those aspects of starting and running a business, and then another one was cases in entrepreneurship, which quite literally every class was a different entrepreneur presenting a problem that they faced starting their business, or a risk that they faced, and the second half of the class was how they solved it, which was absolutely fascinating. But Matt, people generally aren't taught how to run and operate businesses. Most people learn that by happenstance, or there's like Michael and a lot of other people who've gone to the Goldman Sachs, which is a wonderful program that teaches people how to run businesses. So yeah, that's a really good point. Michael, before we get more into traction, I'm really interested to hear you tell a little bit of the story of kind of COVID, your COVID experience. I've actually been wanting to get you on and talk about this, and we just haven't been able um, to get the time together. But y'all had some interesting things go on, or some opportunities that you were able to jump into. Tell us a little bit about that, because I think it's a story that should be shared.
Yeah, sure. So it all happened kind of in a blur, and I think it still is kind of a blur. Uh, I was in a meeting for an entrepreneur group about, being in a peer group, and I had just gotten a text from my wife that all the schools were closing, right? And so that was kind of the pivotal moment, somewhere mid-March, where everybody's like, okay, this is different, this is real, this is happening, and so we had a roundtable meeting here at OPA, and we all were just trying to figure out what's our plan. There's so many unknowns, and so our the word that we kind of came up with was opportunity. There's going to be an opportunity somewhere to do good, or to keep keep our people on the payroll, to just keep this thing going without it completely shutting down. And so we had to shut down for about a week. And an opportunity popped up. I got a call. Somebody was saying, "Hey, I'm working on a prototype for some face shields." Ochsner and some other healthcare professionals are having some PPE shortages, and they don't have what they need. And so, would you guys be willing to cut some prototypes for us for some face shields? And I said, "Yeah, absolutely. Send me the files." So we called in our small team of people that can execute, the CNC routers and laser cutters, and we just kind of got to work on prototyping. And so it went through a couple of rounds, and then fast forward to a couple weeks later, we're producing, I don't know the final count, but it was somewhere north of 40,000 face shields, which went to various healthcare facilities. Because a lot of the PPE in that early stage was not readily available because the supply chain was so disrupted. Nobody had anticipated or had a stockpile ready to go to keep these people safe. So a lot of respiratory therapists, our neighbor Joe, we were able to give him some stuff so he can keep safe, some masks. And then through that opportunity, we met some other folks. They said, "Hey, we have we're making gowns as well." Because they're just going through gowns like crazy, and they need some help with capacity. Basically, they had a team of sewers that they can keep up with the demand. That it was just the cutting process, and how do we cut all these templates so that we can bundle them up and give them to this army of seamstresses. And so we went to their process, kind of studied it, and we looked at it and said, okay, if we were able to take this bolt of fabric and put it 4 or 5 pulls at a time and run the entire table and use our paper patterns, we can kind of like hack the system a little bit and make it maybe 3 or 4 times as fast. We're cutting like 150 layers at a time, just trying to find any bit of efficiency, because we knew that, the faster we cut, the more of these bundles went into the hands to actually get into the auctioneer facilities. So, man, it was 24-hour days, for us. It was 3 shifts. It was, everybody was tired. It was just, we were all really kind of at a break point towards the end when it started to slow up. And then finally the supply chain kind of caught up, and that's where we got some relief. And then things started to taper off a little bit, which is great. So that means that the medical need wasn't as severe, and we can kind of transition our team and get some rest. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. There's a couple things I heard in there. One is opportunity. In a meeting, y'all sat around and said, "Hey, look, there's something bad happening. What's the opportunity?" And I think that's something that is, when you look at a lot of successful entrepreneurs, that's the mindset is, "Hey, yeah, this is bad. Where's the opportunity?" In fact, if you look at a lot of small businesses, entrepreneurs typically start out of something bad that happened. I lost a job. I'm going to start my own business. So that's they look for opportunity. Also, something else is entrepreneurs take risks. I mean, there's risk involved in entrepreneurship, right? And y'all had to take some risks. Say, do we want to throw all of our energy and our resources behind
Yeah.
this? And then those are decisions. Then finally, entrepreneurs oftentimes are creative, right? Here's a problem.
Yeah.
How are we going to solve it? We have this really cool machine, and I think of like your CNC machine as like, my wife has a little Cricut that she can cut like little stickers out.
Yeah.
It's like a Cricut on steroids.
Yeah.
But that's a cool story.
That's a super cool story, but I want to know more details, because you guys are a sign shop, right?
We're a sign shop, yeah.
Wait, I don't understand. How do you go from making signs to making
PPE?
PPE? Yeah, I don't get it. What kind of material are you using?
Yeah, so we're a sign shop. That's correct. But I would kind of expand that word a little bit to industrial fabricator or maker space. We have a ton of machines that they could be producing signs, they could be producing furniture, they could produce just about anything that's in fabrication space. So these machines don't have a natural aptitude to just do graphics.
They're like, no, we only do signs.
Yeah,
we
yeah.
only do signs. Yeah.
That's it.
We're union. We only do signs.
I don't think OPA provides tours to the general public. But if you buy a sign from them, I'm sure that they'll walk you through their facility, and it is fascinating. I mean, the way it's set up, the machines are it's like he said, it's like an industrial fabrication warehouse.
Yeah.
So were you taking?
Yeah, go ahead.
Were you taking some kind of material that you could turn into a sign and turning that into PPE, or did you get different materials?
Yeah. So
what material are you using?
So for the face shields, it was a lot of Lexan, 020 thick, which is just really thin. And then
I have no idea. I have no idea what Lexan is.
Okay, so Lexan is actually a sign product. It is bulletproof. If you've seen the show Mythbusters, and they put those protective shields for like all the bullet stuff that they do, it's shatter resistant. So it's a really durable product.
So it can keep COVID away from people.
These are bulletproof masks.
These are not
Don't shoot me in the face.
These
Don't shoot me in the face.
These are not bulletproof masks. They are very durable, as far as like you couldn't rip it if you tried. So
do you have to put that disclosure on the box that these are not bulletproof?
Okay, so a big piece of the story is we were just one of the vendors supplying one of the main hubs, which is Goodwood, and they're a furniture company, similar to us. And you can ask that same question: how do you get into this? Their opportunity came up, and so and we were so grateful for partnering with those guys, and so so the gown material is not a sign material at all. It has nothing to do with signs. So they would send us truckloads of these big old bolts, a whole truckload full, and we would process that in like 2-3 days. So
that's different in the sense of it's not how do we repurpose our materials for a different use.
Yeah.
It's how do we take other people's materials and feed it through a different process or our process, or how do we come up with a new process that makes this more efficient?
Yeah. And so for us, we think about, okay, how would we do that if it was using all this equipment? So the paper patterns, the plotting, the ability to draw really fast, patterns, that gave us an edge, because, they don't typically have that type of service within, the textile industry. So.
And your machines are like pinpoint accurate. Like, yeah. I've tried to cut something out with scissors, and I can't follow a straight line, much less some like gown pattern. So to throw it on a machine. So but basically, so I have this picture for like the mask. So you have these giant sheets of I'm thinking like plexiglass, like clear, whatever, Lexan material. Yeah. And you just put it on your CNC machine, which is basically a router.
Yep, exactly.
With the dimensions dialed in. And it's just cutting hundreds of these per minute or whatever, per whatever.
Yeah. So you put this 4 foot by 8 foot sheet, which comes on this roll that's about a mile's worth of this roll, right? So you just kind of cut them as you need them. And then you put it on the vacuum table, which is the CNC machine, and it vacuums down, and you have a little spindle, and then the spindle goes and cuts the shape based upon the computer program that you send. So there's all sorts of machining strategies and all sorts of things to make sure that from part to part, everything's uniform. It's as accurate to the thousandth of an inch. And so that cut the face part that wraps around your face. And then we had the laser cutter, which uses a CO2 tube to condense some sort of, look, I'm not going to get into the science of how that actually works, but
you can make stuff up because we wouldn't know anyway.
We don't know.
Yeah. You've seen Dr. Evil and you know how the sharks with the laser beams, it's like that, but on a table.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, you get it.
I've got one of those.
Yeah. So basically, that cuts the acrylic, and then that's the frame that goes around like you would wear glasses, right? And so those two pieces interlock together. It was pretty incredible. So they had a whole Ochsner like technology team doing R&D with us. It was really great. So.
And Ochsner is a local giant medical corporation here in Louisiana.
Mm-hmm.
More regional now.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even say.
Yeah.
Michael, do you have some pictures of this kind of stuff that we could add to our show notes, and so that people could see what you're doing?
Absolutely. Yeah, we have a whole, if you go to Instagram, go to our OPA Signs account, there's a whole story of videos and all sorts of fun stuff. We documented that whole, experience. So you can kind of see some of the machines, the people touching the different types of materials, and it kind of tells that story really well. So I could share that to you guys.
Do you have any face shields hanging around? I'm gonna start walking around with a face shield.
I got you. I can make it happen.
Take care of me.
Yeah.
One size fits all.
Almost.
So here's what's interesting, and I guess one of the reasons I wanted you to tell that story is your company. You had OPA in a position to be able to take advantage of that opportunity. So you were humming along as a company. You're relatively, I would say, pretty efficient, just from all the conversations that we had. That kind of allowed you to hop in and operate, I would say, relatively effectively and take advantage of an opportunity. And you kept mentioning a book, Traction, and a system called EOS. I want to talk a little bit about that and how that's impacted your business at OPA, and how that helped you be successful in kind of this short-term endeavor opportunity.
Sure. Yeah. So we started EOS back in January of this year. So beginning of the calendar year. But the Traction journey for me started a year prior to that. So I've been consuming all the books, speaking to different friends, colleagues that have that have EOS.
Why don't you take one step back? Tell us really quick, describe Traction, just so people kind of have an idea of what you're talking about.
Okay. Yeah. So Traction there's nothing magic in it. It's not going to make your business grow and scale and take off just by reading the book, or obviously. So there's nothing magical in it. The way I can kind of explain it really briefly is it takes all your best practices, your systems, your processes, your people, your data, and it puts it in a vehicle that's just easily to understand. It's an oversimplified operating system for your business. So if you think of your phone like an Apple or an Android, you have like a messenger, you have the phone part, you have a calendar, you have email, you have all these different operational parts within your phone. So EOS is basically, if you were to download into your company these different widgets that help you do your best fundamental practices, and for me, the core is the vision, right? And so the vision is, where do you see yourself? Where's your company going? What kind of goals do you have? And the traction part of it is when that vision starts to come from that like floaty place in the sky down to the ground and actually get some really good momentum, right? And so that's when you take things in like 90-day goals, right? And so we call those rocks. And so those rocks are, how do we build towards that 10-year long-term vision if we just do it part by part by part? And so there's a lot of accountability. And I think that's the big part of goal setting that often fails, even on a personal level, is, when you set a goal, how are you accountable to that goal? And so what EOS does for us is it allows us to sit in a circle, right, once a week and check in on our goals, so that there's no.
When you put it that way, you make it sound really weird. So we kind of sit in a circle.
Yeah, no.
Have a meeting, right? It's a meeting. Right. You don't have to sit in a circle. That's not mandated, right?
Intentionally a level playing field. So the EOS meeting is typically our ownership group and some higher level management folks that can speak to the process of growing our business. And that's the entire goal, is to create a better, more efficient, harmonious business.
Yeah,
Right?
it doesn't sound much different than like other business planning type stuff. So when I read the book several years ago, and if you've ever asked me for a book recommendation on business, I recommended this book to you, Traction. One of the really big things for me, and I loosely implement parts of it into our business. I know for me, like one of the big things was it was kind of freeing. Is early on they talk about visionaries and integrators. Right. So you talked about that climbing the tree and looking forward and having a 10-year plan and how are we going to get from here to there. That's kind of the visionary. They tend to say things sometimes that don't always make sense, that other people kind of look at and that are kind of crazy. I mean, this is literally how it's talked about in the book. And then the integrators are the ones on the ground who take that vision and implement it and integrate it across all those systems that you talk about. And for me, it was kind of freeing. Because when I was acting as the visionary in my business, I always felt bad. I always felt guilty that I wasn't more on the ground sometimes integrating some of those ideas.
So Gino Wickman, who's the author of Traction, has a bunch of spin-off books. And the very next book that I read was Rocket Fuel. And so it's all about the combination between the visionary and the integrator. So when you think of Walt Disney World, you think of Walt Disney. He's the visionary, but you never hear about his brother, who did all of the other stuff, who did the actual, construction management and all the details of hiring and firing and staffing and all that stuff. So that's kind of there's a really great profile test online where you can discover what portion visionary, what portion integrator are you, and you might learn some things about yourself just by taking that test. It's not just another online test to take, but it actually is pretty informative as far as if you find yourself as a business owner or in a business and management, you have an obstacle in front of you. Knowing if you're a visionary or an integrator, how to remove that obstacle is largely dependent on what are your personal aptitudes to like conflict or those types of things. So.
Yeah, it's a lot, Matt, what you talked about earlier, how a lot of counselors want to have their own practices, but they're not taught. They're taught to be really good counselors, but they're not taught to be business owners. There's another really good book. I'm sure you've read it, E-Myth, The Entrepreneurial Myth, which is a pretty popular book. And he kind of talks about the same thing, that businesses, there's 3 roles that need to be played in a business. The entrepreneur, I guess it'd be the visionary in Traction language, the manager, and then the technician. The problem is most small businesses are technicians. They're really good at their craft, but they're not very good at the other aspects of a business. And that's why a lot of them fail. And Traction just does a really good job. The EOS system does a really good job of packaging all that.
Michael, you mentioned that OPA was is a family business. So as you're learning this new language, this new way to think about yourself, this new way to think about the business, are other family members in the business learning this stuff at the same rate? Are they assimilating to it at the same rate?
Sure.
And are you finding out that family members are playing different roles in this new framework?
Yeah, that's a great question. So since January, like prior to that, I had dedicated about a year's worth of learning, getting into the implementer of how do I take this system and then make it actually work for us, right? So through the teaching of what EOS is as an organization here, they say it takes about 7 times before you hear something, before it really starts to take root and be part of like I understand this, I get it. And not only that, you can start to get deeper into that understanding as you say, okay, this is something new, but let me dig a little deeper here. So since January, we've met every single week, haven't missed a single Wednesday. It's a 90-minute meeting, so it unifies us all. And so when we started in January, there was a 2-day offsite where we cast the vision together as a group as to where we're going. And then we started to take that plan, which was a 10-year plan, boil it down to 3 years, boil it down to 1 year, and then boil it down to what's next for us in this next 90 days. So it takes it in small chunks to get to that big 10-year vision. And so we had a really great time. It was difficult. It was really good for us to kind of understand, okay, to get strategic about our business is going to take some work. We've got to step outside the business, not just be in our sales and marketing roles or operations roles, right? So for us, that was the challenging part. And there was a lot of teaching and understanding the different systems and processes. I had a conversation just yesterday. Somebody says, oh, I finally get why that's important, why the accountability chart. The reason they call it an accountability chart is because who's accountable for this portion of the company, and when does it transition from finance to sales, or how did all these different pieces and parts work together in harmony? It's just allowing people to have the space to say, this is mine, this is our problem, but I will handle this problem, and we'll check in next week and see how I did. So we have these little weekly check-ins, which are everything for us.
One of the things that I really enjoyed about the book was, every entrepreneur obviously wants to grow. We want to sell more. We want to be bigger, make more money. But there's a huge emphasis on internal growth, that sometimes before you can really grow big and bring in more business, if you will, your internal processes need to be good. If not, they're not scalable.
Yep.
And I know you and I have talked a lot about processes, and it's taking the time to think through almost every step of the process. So it's almost scripted out.
Right. And
then I know something that you're big on was bringing in technology into certain parts of the process. Mm-hmm. So I'm curious, share. I know you're a big HubSpot fan.
Yep.
HubSpot is oh my goodness, a
CRM.
Thank you, CRM. I lost it for a second there. How has technology helped? I'm curious to hear a little bit about that.
Yeah, so technology it's a great think of the operating system analogy. It's a good way to plug in a process to those types of things. But I think with the EOS process, you want to stay macro and not get too into the details, right? The details will always work themselves out, but every business has a core function, right? So for us, our sales function, HubSpot allows us to make sure that all of our leads are coming through our pipeline, that we know all the details about the leads, and we can communicate clearly and effectively to everybody that wants to reach out to us as a client. And so it removes all those blind spots. And then once the sale gets converted, we'll use a project management software, which we use Basecamp. And so Basecamp then takes all the details of the sale and converts it to operations. So now they have exactly what they need to get to work to actually making the sign or the graphic or whatever.
Going back to your earlier comments about how your company started to implement this this system, what was your role in that? In that you are your owner, but part of the ownership group and part of the family.
Right.
So what has your role been in that process?
Sure. So there are professional EOS implementers who you can hire if you're an entrepreneur and your company needs EOS or wants to go deeper with that. You can hire somebody who's been certified. I want to be really clear. I am not a certified EOS implementer. Those folks have spent hours and hours and hours studying this system and really they've just got a very formulaic way that these implementers go through. So what I did was I said, okay, we don't have the budget right now to hire an implementer, but let me see if I can reverse engineer this and kind of figure it out. And so all the tools are communicated. There's no mystery as to, how the pieces. So for me, it just made sense. I was able to kind of figure it out with the help of some other friends who I went to their EOS meetings weekly, and I just kind of sat in and watched the process and asked questions afterwards. So I was just becoming a student of how practical it was implemented. And so, so that's definitely a goal of mine, in the future, is to become a EOS implementer and go through the process. But
for your company, you kind of played that consultant role.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And continue to play that.
Yes. And so in our company as well, I have that visionaries title where I'm looking at, 20 new ideas every week where we're just kind of brainstorming. So all the creative problem solving and opportunities and things like that. That's kind of my wheelhouse. And we have a sales and marketing director who's looking at how do we take these ideas and push them to the next level. And so that's within our accountability chart. So we know that like it's not all on one person. And so, yeah, it's been really, really good for us to understand that, okay, if we get real strategic with our roles, we can all work more efficiently together. So it's been
sometimes on this podcast, we say the process is as important as the outcome.
Mm-hmm.
Going through that process of whatever it is.
Yeah.
In this case, your leadership team figuring out how to implement this new strategy. How has the process affected the outcome?
Yeah, so it was a difficult process. It was a group therapy session with no therapist at the helm, where we're just kind of working on problems and trying to find the best solutions. But it was really incredible for us to take. I think there was 5 people in the room, and for us to all have the same vision for where we want to head in 10 years was really powerful. So like all those things were already kind of in our gut, in our minds that we hadn't had a chance to really speak together about, which was really, to me, that was the wow moment that, okay, there was not a whole lot of convincing to get somebody on our side or their side or whatever. We were all kind of tracking in that same unity already, which that kind of set the tone for, okay, let's get really creative. Let's start looking at, our target, marketing efforts, and who can we replicate that are already successful clients of ours that we have good partnerships with? Who's next to them in their industry, and how can we reach out to those folks? So it's definitely expanded our reach quite a bit.
Yeah, and like you said, there's like nothing magical about the EOS system or the book traction. What makes it magical, I think, is the transparency of it and the accountability built in. It's all about accountability, because there's nothing here that we've talked about that's I never thought about that. There's nothing rocket science about it. It's just the system and the executing of that system. And a lot of the tools are out there. I mean, you don't have to.
No, you can apply some of them and probably get a lot of value out of it. So one of my favorite ones is the data. There's 6 major components. One of them's data. And so every week we look at our data. So we look at our key measurables together as a group. And data doesn't lie. Data does not have an opinion. It doesn't have feelings. And so, but what you can do is you can tell stories with data. And so for us, we look at our measurables like revenue, or deals that are closed, that are won, our receivables, all sorts of key measurables that tell the story of, okay, that's why this week felt a little bit where it felt a little slower. You could see it in the data, or we felt really busy, and you see those revenue numbers up. And so for us, that historically has been every quarter or every end of the year where you get your P&L, you're like, oh, wow, we should have made some decisions that we didn't really see happening. So the data for us allows us to forecast kind of a few weeks or months what to expect as far as operations is concerned, and all sorts of things. So the data has been probably one of my favorite ones that has been most impactful.
One of the hardest for me is the people part, where they talk about people, how important staff is and people are. And you said this earlier, and I think a lot of business owners, we hear this analogy, right? Like, I got to get the right people on the bus. Yeah. Right? If I can just get the right people on the bus. He takes it one step further and says, it's not about having the right people on the bus. No, it's about having the right people in the right seat on the bus.
Yeah. There's 3 criteria that they talk about. It's like, when you're talking about this person moving into another position, do they get it? Like, do they understand the role? Would they be good for it? Then you have to ask them, do they even want it? Right? Because just because they get it doesn't mean that they actually want it. So that's important, that you just, again, don't hand somebody something like, here's your solution, here's your next step in life. You have to have those 2 things. And the third one is, do they have the capacity in their current day-to-day? So all 3 of those, do they get it? Do they want it? Do they have the capacity? And to me, that that humanizes the process and allows people to speak and say, hey, this is what I need. If you want me to take this role, I'm going to need some help. I'm going to need maybe somebody to fill this spot, so in my accountability box, we can reposition some things so we can start to see some growth, which is, man, that's been incredible for us too as well.
I have a couple of follow-up questions.
Sure.
And they're a little bit more in my realm, they're therapy-esque. So just listening to you talk about that, we've all probably worked in workplaces where people were shoehorned into the wrong seat on the wrong bus, and friction develops and morale drops. And so just curious about this process for you and for OPA. What has that done to morale at the shop?
Yeah, so I think my perspective is a bit unique because I started in this company doing the real estate installations, which is a lot of digging and just out in the sun, and so understanding that that I've experienced a lot of those shoehorns where I've been put in a spot, or I've seen it happen in other departments, or have been in other companies where I've seen that. So I think we've all been in those scenarios. So I think I've taken that hurt or that recent proximity to that experience and have flipped it around and said, okay, how would I have liked to have received that? How could this have gone better? So I think that experience proximity was helpful.
And what's that done for the group there?
Yeah. So for the group, it allows them to have a voice into the system so that they can, when we do these reviews on their jobs every 6 months, it's not how are we seeing your performance, but it's an opportunity for them to speak in and say, these are the things that I think would be better, like allowing, instead of just 5 or 6 people in that level 10 EOS meeting saying how we think it should go, allowing them to speak into it and say, if I had these types of tools, or if I was positioned here, or those types of things. So it's very transparent, and so we have the ability to have a conversation where it doesn't just build up. They know that the door is open anytime for any kind of conversations like that. So we
literally more seats at the round table.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. The next question, I have 2 more, but the follow-up, this one's a little bit more personal in the sense of I work with lots of entrepreneurs, lots of family-owned businesses, and lots of men who are my age, our ages, who have made it in life enough where they're a little bit bored at this point in life. They've kind of entered a phase of life where they're going, what's next on the horizon?
Yeah.
Just curious for you, what has this done for you personally in terms of energizing your career at this phase of your life?
Yeah. So I'm definitely, I have found
you're much younger than me. First of all, much.
I was about to say, Matt, you're calling him an old man, and
much younger.
Yeah. So I think I still have that spark of wanting to always create something, whether it's a new startup or it's a advocacy group for something, something like that. Just finding more. I think also, purpose, cause, passion is important. Like it can't just be a job for me. It's got to have some sort of connection to something that's impactful. So, yeah.
And what is this? What has this done for your home, your family?
Sure.
All of us who are interested in business and are entrepreneurial, that business becomes a love, but we also go home. And I wonder what's this done for your home?
So the kids are hearing the conversations that me and my wife are having about EOS, and she's been a great sounding board for a lot of these ideas as I'm kind of just wrestling around with these thoughts on how to implement certain things. She's giving me good insights as to her perspective. And so the kids are naturally hearing this in the house, and they're saying, well, what if we did our weekly meeting and discussed our issues and set goals together? And I'm like, this is actually their idea, and so
wow.
We don't have a formal type plan, but they're in the room and they hear the conversations and they understand it. And to me, that's that's incredible because I feel like we're
Yeah.
we're building something with them. So it's
I
fun.
did see all the neighborhood
They're
kids.
applying it.
I saw them all sitting in a circle. They must have been having their leadership meeting.
Yeah. And you've seen all the lemonade stands and types of things that Lily's
We
been
have
doing.
we have some entrepreneurs in the neighborhood, man.
We
Huh?
really do. Yeah. Yeah.
Man, my kids are like, "What can I do to make money?
Yeah.
I want to start a business."
Yeah.
My kids are like, how do you feel about that?
How does that make you feel? That's great.
Oh man, Matt, you threw me off. That's
Sorry.
awesome. I want to, Matt, do you have any other follow-up questions? I just kind of want to follow up on one last thing, and then we can start wrapping this up. But there's been a theme throughout the entire conversation of process. Matt said that we often talk about, this is I learned from him, that, oftentimes the process of counseling is more important than the counsel. For me, I talk with clients, the process of financial planning, of the process of understanding your budget and looking at your cash flow is as important as the actual budget itself. So process is obviously something that's very important. EOS is built on processes. An early influencer to me in business, he always told me, he said, Eric, if you ever have a problem, turn it into a process and it'll no longer become a problem. And there's something that I've heard more recently that, we can't solve all of our problems with processes. So the question is, and this is one of the things that EOS does, I know it does for your team, it kind of gives your team a common language. So someone say something and you understand what they're talking about. So one of the things that we say in our office is, hey, is this a problem that we need to solve? Or is this a tension that we just need to figure out how to manage? So talk a little bit, how do you determine, hey, this is an obstacle or a problem that we can solve with a new process? Or, hey, you know what, there's always going to be a tension between sales and service, and we just have to figure out how to manage.
Yeah, so I think the language that we've established is, do we need to circle a transition between two different departments or a process or a problem? And what we do is we identify issues weekly in our level 10 meeting. And so level 10 is we're always striving to be a 10, so certain weeks, our effectiveness, we'll rate our meetings. So our processes are dynamic, right? Nothing's set in stone. And so our ability to create a difference between, is this an issue that somebody in their accountability chart needs to handle? So like, is it a short-term weekly issue that can be solved really quickly? Or is it a long-term issue that actually might be a project like a rock that is growth oriented, right? So that's a 90-day type thing. So we like to kind of divide them into two. Or is it just on, that's your responsibility as the director of sales, like tighten up that process and make sure that, you're sticking to the game plan that we've developed, so is it followed by all, is it well known? Do people know these processes? Is that the issue? Is it too much? Like, is this process too problematic because there's too many steps? How can we simplify this? Great thing about EOS, that in my opinion, is its simplicity. So your entire business plan is on 2 pages on a PDF, right? Mm-hmm. That's your long-term and short-term goals. And so your issues list is on that. And so it's all very accessible, easy, simple. So I think a lot of times our processes become too complicated, and we get in our own ways with trying to craft this perfect experience when really you just need to kind of craft a simple experience, from A to B.
Yeah, so, I find that it always gets more complicated before it gets simple again.
Yeah, and I think simple is complicated. To do something very simple and the right solution, that's a very difficult thing to do sometimes.
It is. My favorite Bruce Lee quote. It goes something along the lines of this: before you learn the art, the martial art, right? A punch is just a punch and a kick is just a kick. But as you learn the art, a punch is no longer a punch and a kick is no longer a kick. But once you've learned the art, a punch is just a punch and a kick is just a kick. I think that is the perfect synopsis of building out business processes.
I'll have to chew on that a little bit.
Think about that, man. We'll have a beer and chat on that one day on the front porch.
You should punch each other.
We should practice it. Yeah. Is this really a punch?
Is this really? I don't want to get punched by you, man.
That was not just a kick.
I'm not a fighter. I'm not a fighter. Matt, do you have any closing comments or questions before I let Michael kind of maybe share any final thoughts?
I love the stories of the COVID pivot, as I think of it, when businesses found a new way to do something. And I think that's amazing. And what you guys were able to do just sounds really amazing. Not only is it just a really cool application of your fabrication abilities, but it actually was helpful to a lot of people. So I really do appreciate that. And thank you for that. And I would love to put out a call to others that if you are in a business that were able to do a really interesting pivot like OPA and like Michael, we would love to hear from you. We have a contact form at building-us.com, and we would love to hear from your business about how you were able to do the COVID pivot like Michael. It would surprise me if people were able to pivot as successfully and as interestingly as you guys were at OPA. Good job.
Well, thank you. Yeah.
The COVID pivot. That sounds like a New Orleans dance move.
Right.
It definitely does.
Or maybe a new Netflix docuseries.
The COVID pivot. We should do that. Yeah, Michael, I think entrepreneurship is fun. It's exciting. It's exhilarating. It's risky. It's challenging. It's hard. It's emotional. So I think a couple takeaways from some of the things that you said that I think are so important is accountability is huge. Not just to your team, but you talk about being in a peer group. So like you hang out with other entrepreneurs.
Yep.
You hang out with other people who can tell you, hey, do this, don't do that, or who've been where you want to be and can give you some really tactical things to do to get there. And I love the fact that you and your wife have I'm sure Matt, as the couples counselor, likes this too. The fact that you and your wife have these conversations and she's part of it. I know that the conversations that you and I have had over the past couple of years have been impactful for me, and they've actually inspired me to do some cool things with some of the programs that I'm about to launch here moving forward. Just some of the reactions and support and encouragement that I've gotten from you. So, man, I appreciate from a business standpoint, but also from a friendship and encouragement standpoint. It's a lot of fun. So give us some closing thoughts, and then we'll go from there. If someone wants a sign, like real practically, this guy does signs and he sounds cool, I need a sign. Where do they go?
Yeah, so start at our website, opasigns.com. We have an online store that has some stuff that you can buy ready-made, but also we can help you fabricate something that's outside the norm. We're a fun, creative industrial fabricator. And if you have a project, come by. We'll give you the Willy Wonka tour. You can see all the different stuff, all the different machines. It's an experience. So no money back guarantee for the tour, but I'm sure you'll learn something and see something, maybe a project that you get inspired by. So yeah, I appreciate it.
Awesome, man. Thanks for taking time to come share with us and our listeners. It's always fun to hear other people's stories. Entrepreneurship is squarely in the foundation of this idea of building us, of investing in relationships, investing in building our family. So appreciate your input.
And thank you so much for having me. I appreciate you guys too as well.
Dr. Matt Morris maintains an active private practice for couples and families in the greater New Orleans area. To learn more about his work, visit drmattmorris.com. Eric Garcia can be found online at plan-wisely.com. His branch office is located in New Orleans, Louisiana. The branch phone number is 504-218-5479. Securities offered through Royal Alliance Associates Incorporated, member FINRA, SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through New Century Financial Group, LLC, a registered investment advisor. Insurance services offered through Garcia Financial Group, LLC. Entities listed are not affiliated.